that each product have their own impact on environment from A to Z of its linear lifetime. We learn to grow our own food, making our own natural cleanser, learn that less is more, and to control our consumption behavior, we're no longer interested in promotion, giveaway, cashback, or any marketing gimmicks just to have what we don't need. And we learn to value what we already have. And here are some benefits of living a more sustainable life. Less consumption of food coloring, food flavoring, and preservatives, less synthetic chemical exposure, less snacking, cook more healthier, pesticide and synthetic fertilizer free, vegetable from our own garden, and having our own natural cleanser. Thank you for listening. If you want to see how we minimize our daily waste, you can visit our Instagram at 021 Suara Sampah. Thank you very much.
Andhini, thank you so much for that very insightful presentation. And I was just struck by how practical and simple some of your ideas were, like growing your own food, making your own cleanser, and just how obvious it is that the benefits of it, snacking less, cooking more, healthier lifestyle. So I know lots of people will be interested to see your presentation if you're willing to share it afterwards. And by the way, I forgot to mention at the start that this session is a keynote session, and it is called How Much Waste Are You For? 10, 5 or 0? And Kelly, you have been the first speaker. Now let's see if there's been any questions. If you do have a question, folks, put it in the comments section and we will get to them now. I don't know if you can see the comments there. We are getting a lot of people saying that they liked it. Hello from frozen Kazakhstan, but today is sunny. Let's see here if there's any questions coming in. Sometimes if you give a very good talk, like you did, it's very comprehensive and you explain everything very well.
Thank you. Here.
Yeah, you're welcome. I have a question. Was it hard? How many people did you say were in your family?
3. Me, my husband, and my son. My 9 years old son.
Was your 9-year-old son excited about the proposition of growing your own food, learning about horticulture? Was this exciting for them?
Yeah, so at the beginning, so actually he's a zero waste baby because we learned to minimize our waste and start this journey is when I'm pregnant gitu ya. So when he's delivered to the world gitu ya, he's already see their parents doing the zero waste lifestyle every day gitu. So for him, this is our everyday life gitu. It's not hard for him to do what me and my husband do daily in minimize our waste, including growing our own food. Yes.
Yeah, it comes naturally because he's been watching by example. And yeah, somebody said, nice, a zero waste baby. That's funny. Anda wants to know, do you mind sharing your natural cleanser recipe? What was in this natural cleanser?
Okay, so we made an eco enzyme using leftover vegetable and fruit scrap, and then we use like castle soap, and then we use coconut oil, and then we use the I think who can answer this best is the next speaker, Mr. Ikbal Alexander, because he often to share a workshop gitu ya, how to make a natural cleanser. But yes, I made eco enzyme and then using natural source that we can found easily at home, like coconut oil, and then honey, raw honey, yeah, just like that.
It makes so much sense, and thank you for saying it, because sometimes we don't mention the very obvious things. You know, when we're cleaning our houses, all the chemicals that we use and the smell and the fumes, it cannot be good for us. Okay, well, listen, thank you so much for that. Andhini, we are going to go straight to our next talker, since you have mentioned them and said that they might be able to answer the question in more depth about how to make your own natural cleanser. So let's speak now.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn.
Thank you so much. And I hope you feel better. I know you feel good, but I hope you get a negative test soon, you and your family.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's go now to Ikbal Alexander. Ikbal Alexander works at a recycling center, the Kertabumi Recycling Center. Ikbal, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, everyone.
So can you address that question first, Ikbal, in more detail, maybe?
Yep.
If someone wanted to go about making their own home cleanser, now obviously we don't want people to start mixing their own chemicals and causing explosions in their house, but what simple things could they use, do you think, that would be effective?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of indigenous biodiversity you can use to create your own cleanser, from a mint, a cucumber, or you could also use gingers. There's a lot of organic material that contains antioxidant, antibacterial that you could just explore. But my main tips is just to look what provided around you. If you live in Indonesia, we are blessed with a lot of gingers and a lot of herbs, so you could make a cleanser out of that. But I think you could also find a lot of beneficial biodiversity across the world.
And is there a good resource to check out for people online if they want to see what kind of like vegetables and things that are easily accessible that could be used as cleansers?
Yeah, so we did a lot of research on how to identify herbs or plants that we could make a cleanser out of those. So you could just check our Instagram or YouTube or even our website to find out what we have been making this far.
Ikbal, thank you so much. And now I'll let you get on with your talk because you work at a recycling center. You're the founder of a recycling center, and you have some simple ideas on how to reduce waste.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Hold on, let me share my presentation. I think we've been talking about a zero waste lifestyle for decades, but somehow our societies couldn't get their head around. They didn't know how or when to start. Despite of the redundant information we could get online, somehow it doesn't make easier for most of us. So basically, this is my sum up of my personal journey to reduce waste, not only for myself but also for people around me, for bigger communities, to make easier transition into everyone's daily life. And this is a brief about me. I just graduated from my master's degree in environmental science back in 2021. That's kind of helped me to influence people more on how to reduce or adopt zero waste lifestyle. And basically my first idea is to start small with something that comfort you. You could have one of these zero waste hacks in your bag, or it could be tumbler or food container or anything. Or you could, if you like gardening, you could start with growing your own food. There is no fixed formula to implement a zero waste lifestyle. So basically, it's depend on your resources, your financial resources, your accessibility. And the main thing is you need to start small with something that comforts you, because basically we have to do this transition for the rest of our life. And if you start with a massive transition that will burden you or totally change your lifestyle, it will be so difficult for you to sustain. And so, yeah, it could be anything. So just aware of where you can improve in your lifestyle. And this is just a simple but worth noting new waste management paradigms. I think we all agree here that reduce is the most effective ways to waste management, but reduce is not the absolute solution. We also need other ways, like reuse, recycle, and recycle is in the bottom too, because we all know that recycle requires energy, time, and also skill. But at the same time, recycle also creates job opportunities. So basically, it's the combination of all of this. And the next one is leading by example, meaning that you're guiding others through your behavior and inspiring them to do the same. We couldn't create a community free of waste if we just do it by ourselves. So we need to get our loved ones involved. Changing habit always takes time, but just make sure that your persistent behavior will eventually make them change their mind. So this is a simple thing that I did at my house back then. I always let my family members to contribute to create a zero waste house. A simple thing like I let my niece to draw in the waste bin and always make sure that the waste bin smells good and clean, so they want to start segregating. And just after 2 years, I'm doing composting at my house. Then finally, my mom participated. So it even took 2 years for my mom to start composting. So a changing habit is always uncomfortable for everyone. So we just make sure that the transition is easier. And this is the main source of waste in Indonesia, and almost half of it is in household. So it's important if we talk about waste management, we start from the closest, from the small community, which is our family. So just make sure that you live in the family that have the same mission about how to reduce waste. And other thing that I do is regular declutter. I always put my things under 4 boxes. The one that I always keep, the one that I want to recycle, the one that I want to sell or donate, and the one that I don't use anymore. And this has also helped me to always have a space in my house. And my main idea, basically, I always get rid of stuff that doesn't give spark in your life. And things like single socks, outdated technology, old books, free stuff, souvenirs, plastic containers. That's the thing that we always get a lot in our lifestyle recently. So this is something that we need to consider which one, gives sparks in our life. And simple things just to create a regular schedule to declutter, and donate things that you haven't used for the last 1 year, repair broken items, or just let them go. And support your communities is important if you want to be the catalyst in your community. So start doing something, small thing like go to a school and educate them how to recycle, or join work cleanup day, ask your friend to clean up some area. That also helps. But what I did in the last 6 years, I created 85 waste bank across Indonesia in 47 cities and regencies. And every month we save waste almost 60,000 kilos and recycle them into a circular economy. And we also recycle small things like the waste that we collected in the ocean. We recycle into a chair or a souvenir, like just to make sure that we give like a second chance for waste to be used for more longer period of time. And the last one is just to act now. We live in the digital era, so you could just simply share like good green ideas how to reduce waste in your social media. That will also beneficial to move our society into a greener movement. Thank you.
That was brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Ikbal. And those waste management centers that you run, very impressive. You said you have, is it 85 around Indonesia?
Yes, 85.
How did you come up with the funding to start 85 recycling centers and get the local governments on board and local authorities?
I started with zero funding. I think it just requires commitment and hard working. And eventually when you work hard, people will notice, government will notice, and they're gonna try to help. And waste is not my only problem. I think it's like the whole nation problem. And if you come up with a good solution, I think they will consider to, join your movement, so they will help in a way that they could.
And your graphic was very interesting. The majority of the waste in Indonesia comes from households, and then the second largest was markets, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
And what kind of waste is coming from the markets? Is it organic waste? Is it pallets of wood? Is it plastic? Is it?
Yeah, in Indonesia, half of the waste is organic waste. So what I did recently just focus on urban composting, how to help family to compost their organic waste. So if we could able to manage our organic waste, basically we solve half of the waste problem in Indonesia.
Wow. If you have a question for Ikbal, everybody put it in the comments section and we will put it to him now. And I know that there are some comments coming in about the previous speaker. And when we mentioned the zero waste baby, Noble Andres Paz said, I like the idea of a zero waste baby. Maybe we could take it a bit further by spreading the message in more channels. My idea is to make something like infographic, which could contain simple tips and share it in social media or roadside advertising board. Well, I'm not sure what that says there. Maybe we could get cooperation from local supermarkets, ask them to create an educational board which can help educate parents. Sorry for the late reply. And then people are agreeing education is key. And that is a good idea, that the zero waste baby, if we promoted that kind of idea, make sure that your child is zero waste from the moment it's born, have a zero waste baby. Well, then, as the first speaker said, they grew up with it. They're so used to it. So it wasn't difficult to change habits. Whereas you spoke about your mother, or was it your grandmother? It took her 2 years to start composting because she wasn't used to it. She had to break a habit.
Yeah, that's true. I think changing a habit is very uncomfortable for most of us. So I think we just need to make sure everyone start their transition easier by giving example, by providing tools that make them start easier.
And how's her composting going now? Has she gotten completely used to it?
Yeah, I think now my mom has more compost container than me, so I'm very proud of her.
Hey, that's the way to do it. Well, Ikbal, thank you so much. And if we have more questions coming in, we'll come back to you. And thank you for your tips about making a cleanser as well at the start of the presentation.
Thank you. I'll talk to you again.
Thank you. We'll talk to you again. And we're moving on now. We're staying in the country I'm in. We're staying in Italy. And we're going to talk to one of our favorite people. It is Enzo. And Enzo is going to be talking about from organic waste to compost, turning a problem into fertility. So let's find out how he does that. Enzo.
Indeed. Spot on, Colin. And good morning, everybody. And thanks again for inviting me. It's always exciting. So exciting. And the previous speakers have been inspiring. And I love Ikbal's mom for the number of compost bins she's running right now. However, let me share my screen. Coming up in a while. Can you see that?
Yes, we see it. Perfect.
In presentation mode. A very brief introduction about myself. I'm here representing Zero Waste Europe. Zero Waste Europe is the European chapter of Gaia, which is the Global Alliance for Incineration Alternatives. But I have got a long-dated cooperation with Let's Do It as well. And I love the World Cleanup Day and more to come, of course. So why is organics important? Already Ikbal brought it up. It is the largest contributor to diversion from disposal, to diversion from littering, to diversion from landfills, incinerators, whatever. But sometimes it's underestimated because, when we do composition analysis, when they do composition analysis, because most of the times it is the waste management company or the waste management department doing the composition analysis of municipal waste. First thing they do, they screen out the so-called fines, minus 20, in order to do better hand sorting of the remainders, But in the minus 20, 80% is food waste. And therefore, it should be reattributed to organics. And so actually, once you start a composting program, its actual potential is higher than what composition analysis tell us, typically. This is another figure. This is coming from another area in the world. This is from Southern America. However, Ikbal already said, when we tackle the organics, we sort out at least 50% of the problem. I would say we sort it all out, because the importance of organics is not only from the quantitative angle, the largest contributor to diversion from disposal, but also it has got a huge operational importance. Since once we minimize organic waste in residual waste, we make it much less fermentable. And so we may, for instance, start cutting the collection rounds for mixed garbage, or for what we call residual waste then. And this leads to cost optimization of separate collection on its whole, but also it is a further nudge, a further driving effect for better separation of the dry recyclables as well, paper, glass, plastics, metals, because people will separate more in order to get rid of them instead of waiting until the next collection round for residual waste. So the importance of organics is huge under many angles. But once we discuss organics, we are not just talking about waste management. Organics are at the crossroads of different environmental policies, such as restoring fertility and fighting desertification. We do have a United Nations Convention to combat desertification, which led to the Paris Agreement signed by different countries in 1994. And one of the strategies it considers is restore organic fertility by giving organics back to the soil. And so compost is perfectly fit for that. There is also an international initiative in this respect carried on by scientists, which is called 4 per meal, giving organics back to soils in order to increase the soil organic matter by 4 per meal. And so fight against desertification and also contribute to tackling climate change, as I will say in a while. Also, we can make soils and agriculture more resilient against floods, landslides, because it increases the water absorbing power of the soils, against eutrophication, because we do use slow release nitrogen, which is included in compost instead of fast release nitrogen as the one in chemical fertilizers. And so most of the nitrogen will be taken up by the roots instead of being leaked into the groundwater. But also we can store carbon in soils. You know, we are doing whatever is in our possibilities in order to fight climate change. And climate change is happening because the percentage of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is getting above 400 ppms, parts per million. But actually, the main pools of carbon in the planet are oceans first, and then comes the soils. So if we increase the amount of carbon in the soils, we will have more carbon in the soils to produce fertility and less carbon in the atmosphere as noxious carbon dioxide to produce global warming. So that's important. These are the reasons why, for instance, the European Union adopted a widespread obligation, a common obligation to implement separate collection of organics everywhere by January the 1st, 2024. It is already a mandate in the Netherlands, in Germany, in Italy, and even in Romania. But let me go on. Of course, we are zero wasters, aren't we? Let's do it fully adopted, the zero waste approach. We know that zero waste is the perfect toolkit in order to turn the vision of circular economy, keeping the materials in the loop in their highest and best status for as long as possible. We want to turn this vision into operational reality through a zero waste approach. In the zero waste approach, we do have a cascading principle. We always try to target plan A, and then we move progressively to plan B and plan C, but always trying to avoid plan Z, which would be landfilling, incineration, and littering, of course. So what is plan A when it comes to organics? Plan A is food recovery programs, food banks. Then we may consider, so first of all, feed the humans. Then we may consider feeding the animals. Of course, feeding the humans is for materials which are still suitable for consumption. For instance, goods which are next to expire from the shelves at supermarkets. And those are perfectly suitable for food recovery programs. Then we may consider feeding the animals. And then in the last instance, we may consider feeding the soils through composting programs, but never ever feed landfills and incinerators. Okay, we have got a vast array of approaches in order to do composting, also starting from the most simple level, which is home composting, individual composting, and moving progressively up towards community composting, and then centralized or decentralized professional composting. We will see them. I want to give you a very quick overview. Stupid things first. This is what my university professors were always telling me. First 10 minutes were for stupid things, the basics. Let's come to the basics. Composting is a natural process. So there are guys out there, microbes, earthworms, ready to work free of charge for us 24/7. We have to feed them properly. Anyway, they do not want to have any wage. They just want to be fed properly. It must be controlled and engineered anyway to a larger or a smaller extent so as to make it faster, ensure high quality composted outputs, and minimize or totally avoid problems such as odor generation, greenhouse gases. Composting is aerobic. If you don't run it properly, it produces methane. Methane is good in anaerobic digestion because then it's captured in order to replace fossil methane as a renewable source of energy. But in composting, it would become fugitive methane into the atmosphere, which would aggravate the global warming because methane is a very powerful greenhouse gas. If the natural process runs well, the temperature increases, which leads to sanitization. So there is no need to spray out sanitizers or any fancy way to get a safe material. It's nature itself, biogenic heat, which ensures what we call pasteurization of the mass, which is getting composted. We do not have to reinvent the wheel. The composting science has long been consolidated. By the way, very hot off the press. Right yesterday, Gaia came out with an astonishingly beautiful guide to composting, from backyard composting to community composting to centralized composting, and even covering anaerobic digestion. You can download it free of charge from the Gaia website. Also, we typically say small is beautiful. Is it always like that? This is a point which I care about most, because let's consider transportation, sustainable transportation. Is a car which is smaller than a train more sustainable than a train? So sometimes we do need bigger things in order to be more sustainable. In other words, we need small-scale composting in our backyard whenever possible, but for all the people who do not have gardens or who do not have time, because we cannot compel everybody to do home composting, or who do not have the commitment because it takes commitment to do it right, then we may collect organics and send them to a centralized composting site. So both have got a place in the system, decentralized and centralized composting systems. Different types of materials. In composting, we have got different types of materials. We do not want to list them all, but roughly, I suspect that you know what is organic waste. My plan is to group them up into two main bundles in order to make it easy. On the one hand, we have got the so-called hard or slowly decaying materials. Those are the bulky materials. And typically it is garden waste, park waste, bamboo, husk, straw. These are carbon-rich materials. They are mostly needed in order to make the composting heap bulky and conductive to air. Let's remember it is an aerobic system and it needs oxygen to get into the heap. Then on the other hand, we have got the soft materials or putrescible materials. They are rich in nitrogen, they are fastly degrading. This includes vegetable, cooked food waste, sludge. Of course, sludge is for centralized composting and not for backyard composting, meat and fish waste, whatever. Of course, we do not have stirrers. In home composting programs, in centralized composting, we have got mixing machines, we have got screw mixers, whatever. In home composting, we do not have them. The very simple rule, the rule of the thumb, is make layers. It's the best way to have them thoroughly mixed up. Also, this is a wonderful drawing from Zero Waste Indonesia, by the way, YPBB, which is a local composting network based in Indonesia, and they do wonderful home composting programs. And they, as you can see, well, we have got the soft and the hard, we make layers, but also if you take a look more thoroughly, the first layer should be made of hard materials which do not degrade and keep the food bulky. Why so? Because we need to ensure drainage of excess water out. Composting is aerobic, and therefore, where there is too much water, there's not much oxygen, okay? Only fish can breathe in water. Microbes, just like humans, cannot. And so we need a drainage layer. So the first layer should be made of straw, or you may consider building up the compost heap or the compost silo on a wooden pallet, as you can see here. So the excess water is drained out. By the way, this is a very simple way to make a do-it-yourself compost silo. Of course, you may purchase the plastic composting bins. That's wonderful also to recycle plastics. And much as we say, reuse and reduction are plan A for sustainability, but then I always remind myself and everybody, but recycling is the low-hanging fruit in a circular economy. And so we have got huge amounts of plastics. Unfortunately, while we pave our way towards reduction and reuse, we have got huge amounts of plastics to recycle, and we can recycle them into many things, including composting bins. But you can do yourself a compost silo with a mesh wire. You can use a fabric in order to insulate it from excess heat, excess cold, to hide it a little bit and make it more, with proper dress code in your garden. But as you can see, it's very, very easy. You can do it yourself with a few bucks, with a few dollars in your hands. And once you know the basics, you can do it in many different ways. Look at this composting program in Malabon. This is from Philippines. The tower composting system, or the jeans composting system in order to make it more attractive at material recovery facilities. Still, it is making layers, with the first layer with the slowly decaying materials in order to get rid of excess water. Then you may consider community composting sites. This is quite common across the world in many sites. You can find it also in a few public parks in Southern Eastern Asia. This is from Switzerland. For instance, in Zurich, which is the largest city in Switzerland, there is a long track record of community composting history with literally hundreds of community composting sites. This is from Besançon, which is also a mid-sized city based in France, but we may consider Pontevedra in Spain and many others here and there across the world. Then moving up in order to have a fully fledged strategy and capture all the organics which are produced by a given region, by a given area. We may consider decentralized and modular composting system. Once we start separate collection programs for those who do not have the possibility to carry out home composting programs or take part in community composting programs, we may consider separate collection and taking it to decentralized or centralized composting sites. This is decentralized modular composting. It's particularly smart because you can start with a small module totaling some 2,000, 3,000 tons a year. It may be based on biocontainers, as you can see on your left-hand side, or on aerated static piles, as you can see on your right-hand side. And then you can just adjust, add further modules, growing it up while the separate collection programs are expanding in the area. So it's particularly smart. Another approach I do love, this is from Austria. Austria is probably the most advanced country in the world when it comes to capture of organics, because not only do they have an obligation for separate collection of organics, but the obligation is transferred to each and every household. So each household has to do some home composting or take part in separate collection program for bio-waste. This is a bird's eye view of what they call bäuerliche Kompostierung, which is a German word that stands for composting done by farmers or rural composting. So instead of building new sites, they engage with farmers and they pay the farmers, telling them, okay, you have got the slabs, you have got machinery, you have got interest in using the end product. So instead of building a brand new site, we pay you for the service you can offer to the municipality. And this seems particularly smart. And then if you need a larger composting site, as it happens in metropolitan areas, I live near a city, which is Milan, totaling 1.4 million people and hosting 800,000 daily commuters working in Milan and producing food waste in Milan. And 100% of the population, plus the large producers such as restaurants and canteens, have already been covered with separate collection programs for organics, which captures 87% of the total organics generated by the city. So yes, we can do that also in densely populated areas. But of course, the 150,000 tons of organics which are getting collected in Milan, they need a larger composting hub. You may have different technologies. This is based on dynamic base with a turning machine, as you can see in the background here, and force aeration from beneath the compost heaps. And of course, once you consider such large facilities, typically we need to consider also odor management systems, because this is inherently connected to good management of large composting sites. We do not have to cause any nuisance to the hosting communities, of course. Okay, then putting the icing on the cake, and we are at the end of my presentation. There's also room for anaerobic digestion. As I already quickly mentioned early on, anaerobic digestion is anaerobic without oxygen and keeps carbon instead of producing biogenic carbon dioxide through degradation, as it happens with composting. It is biogenic, so it is climate neutral. It does not exacerbate global warming. However, anaerobic digestion in this respect is even better because it keeps carbon in the form of renewable methane. And this may replace fossil methane in our kitchen fires or as a fuel to propel the garbage collection trucks or public transportation. Why not? Wow. So it is better from an overall environmental standpoint because it produces both a renewable fuel and a soil improver. It is typically better for densely populated areas because there is a disproportion between the so-called soft materials, highly putrescibles, and the bulky carbon-rich materials, which are highly needed in composting. And therefore, a first step through anaerobic digestion may help work around such a problem. But we have to consider, typically the unit investment costs are typically higher than composting. So subsidy programs are typically needed in order to work it out. In Europe, there are very high subsidies for renewable energy in order to meet the renewable obligations, and this is acting as a driver for anaerobic digestion. Anyway, should you want to dig deeper into the subject, there is a very good paper you can download free of charge. It is a 4-page paper. Basically, it is like a decision-making tree between composting and anaerobic digestion, where to choose what, under which conditions to choose what, and above all, it tells you what is needed in order to make it right. For instance, when it comes to anaerobic digestion, we say it is preferable to have a post-composting step for digestate in order to maximize the benefits of giving organic matter back to soils and minimize a few inconveniences of giving digestate, such as releasing ammonia, volatile fatty acids, which may exert a slightly phytotoxic effect on the vegetation, and so on and so forth. However, with that, I'm done. Thanks for listening. And always remember, there's people, there's guys out there ready to work free of charge for you 24/7. Just consider feeding them properly. Thank you.
Enzo, thank you very much for that brilliant talk. I see the one comment in the comment section saying very informative, very educational. I would agree with that. And I liked your thing that you hammered home. There are people willing to work for you free of charge, 24/7. They never take breaks. They never strike. They'll cause you no headaches. And they're right there at your front door. Very quickly, Enzo, we're going to start the panel discussion now for this keynote session. How much waste are you for? 10, 5 or 0. We'll bring in our other two brilliant speakers in a moment. But let's start with you as we just finished with you, Enzo. A question in here. And it says, what is the place of plant compost in the development of the agricultural sector? And this is from Jean Borrell. And they say, in my opinion, vegetable compost is the best. It's the easiest and least expensive to make. It would be necessary to develop the plant compost sector because there are species such as Teutonia diversophiala that could be used with animal waste to obtain biofertilizers.
Yes, indeed. Well, I would say there is an important truth in that composting vegetables is the easiest thing to be done because they have got a lower amount of nitrogen inside, so they are more slowly decaying, and so controlling the process and making it right is easier. However, I would not forget the importance of diverting also meat waste, animal waste, fish, meat, whatever, because if we leave it aside, this happens, for instance, in the Netherlands and in Flanders, which are glorious countries when it comes to composting. In the Netherlands, composting has been an obligation, separate collection has been an obligation since 1995, but they have designed the system calling it GFT, which stands for only vegetable, garden and fruit. So they leave meat and fish in residual waste, which concentrates meat and fish in residual waste, and it may cause problems. It increases the needed capacity for incineration in the Netherlands, but in the rest of the world, it will simply increase the amount of methane produced once such materials are getting landfilled. So my effort and my goal is always to have them composted together with vegetables, both vegetables and animal waste.
Another comment here, Enzo, as well, because the example you gave was Austria. You said Austria were one of the best when it comes to this. And somebody said, unfortunately, the example given here only counts for the countryside of Austria. And this comment is from Liz Toth. She said 1/4 of the population lives in Vienna, where most people don't compost. And if they do, they put their waste into plastic bags.
That's right. Holy wars, and we do know, and that's quite strange, you know, because when in the early 90s, we were trying to promote separate collection in Milan, we hosted quite a few times people from Achtung 40er, the 48ers. It's the 48th department in the municipal administration, which is the one tasked with waste management. And they were coming to Milan quite a few times, invited and hosted by us in order to tell Milan, please move on. You can do that. Now Milan is leading the way. It is showing it is perfectly feasible for 100% of the population, and Vienna is lagging behind. Basically, in Vienna, they are only collecting garden waste, food scraps, mostly from the large producers. But the problem in Vienna, as in many cities, is the high capacity for incineration. Whenever you have got a high capacity for incineration, you have got a problem with the so-called stranded assets. This causes what we call the financial lock-in, the need to send a certain tonnage to incineration in order to ensure the payback of the capital expenditures. And so this makes, you know, the waste management departments, the decision makers, a bit less committed when it comes to promoting separate collection, composting, and recycling. That's the problem. However, we have got, as I mentioned, right around the corner, the common European obligation as of January the 1st, 2024, everywhere, including big cities in Europe, there will have to be separate collection of the organics, and this will boost once again the interest and focus on composting, including Vienna.
So wait, Enzo, are you saying that in some cities like Vienna, because they have put so much capital expenditure and investment into a facility like an incinerator for waste, that they have to be seen to use it? Is that what you're saying, that they have to have a certain amount of waste going to it every year to justify the expense they put in?
There's impressive evidence in this respect, Colin. Unfortunately, this is called lock-in. Lock-in gives you the idea because it means you get, trapped in the need to use a certain facility just because it is very, very capital intensive. And so you need to feed it with a given tonnage in order to ensure the payback. Incinerators are getting paid back based on the gate fees. And so they need the permitted and designed tonnage to be delivered each day, each month, each year. This is why we say, but also the European Union themselves, they say, in the European communication on the role of waste to energy in circular economy, they have brought up the problem of the stranded assets. And they said, if you ever consider incineration, do not design it on the current amount of residual waste, but try to figure out how much will be residual waste in 30 or 40 years' time, because we have got ambitious targets and goals ahead of us. Unfortunately, at some point, incineration always causes frictions and problems with circular economy, separate collection, recycling, and waste reduction programs.
That's very interesting. Let's go back to our first speaker, who was Andhini in Indonesia. Andhini, of course, was talking about the stuff that she implements at home with her husband and her son, who is 9. There was a question in here saying, I think if we could make it more simple to do DIY compost, which can be minimum effort, people would be more inclined to do it, like a jumpstart kit, an effort. If it might be a term that we could use, for example. Mr. Ikbal mentioned urban composting. We could put it in a pot and share it to urban populations with lack of spaces and yards, like people who live in apartments. So I want to just ask, first of all, Andhini, you were talking about you and your husband. What kind of place do you live in? Do you live in an apartment or a house with a garden? If you can still hear me, Andhini. If not, no problem. I'll come back to you. Let's go back then to Ikbal Alexander. Ikbal Alexander, have you any take on that or any suggestions? They're saying that, okay, it's easy for people who have a big back garden to compost because they can look out, they can dig a hole, they can do the suggestions that Enzo has just suggested. But what if someone lives in an apartment like New York City? It might be overwhelming for them to start to think of composting. Do you have any advice?
Yeah, traditionally we do it in the ground where we have soil and all those worm and microbes will degrade all the food. But in urban, it's different case. It's more challenging. Like what I did in Jakarta, in urban city, most of people live in the vertical residences. So we created like huge spot. So you could still do composting in your balcony or close to your kitchen. So I think we could still do composting even if we live in the vertical residence, or even we don't have a land to do it. And I think there's plenty of like mobilize a composter, so you could buy it online and it's very affordable. So I think it's not really a problem anymore if you don't have if you don't have like a space or ground. I think it just matter of how bad you want it.
And maybe some misconceptions, people who have not done it before. Is there a smell if you were doing it in an apartment, on your balcony, in a pot? What about a smell? What about rodents being attracted?
Yeah, there's a way to get rid of the smell. And I think we need also to learn how to, make a good compost. So good compost won't generate bad smell and will be done in 4 weeks. That's the aim, and it's achievable if we learn how to do it. And I think that also a lot of information out there we could learn. But me in Jakarta, we share, we do workshop for free if people want to know more about how to do urban compost in their own apartment.
Now, Andhini is back with us in Indonesia. Andhini, can you hear me?
Hi, hello.
Yeah.
Yes, I can hear
Someone
you.
was asking a question in the comments about how do people get a jump start, for want of a better phrase. So when you said you've been doing this kind of all of your life, you and your husband and your kid grew up with it, they were a zero waste baby. But when you started, did you find it overwhelming, composting? and reducing, reusing, recycling at home?
No, not exactly, because when we start in 2012, we really know why we start doing this. We're doing research as much as we can from the documentary, article, and then we know that the environment is not it's not good for our newborn to live. So we need to do something, and we start with very simple step. We start from a small step, baby step. Just our first step are using the cloth diaper where my son born, and then gradually until now we don't have any garbage waste at home, and we don't and we have residual waste less than 1 kilogram per year. So it's a baby step. And
do you live
gradually.
in an apartment or a house with a garden?
I live in a house with 41 meters square, so it's a small house, and we're using 5 composter bin. 4 is outside the house, and 1 is in the kitchen. So we're composting in the kitchen near the dining room as well, and then we composting use biopore in our mini garden.
And you don't find there's any problems with the composting in the house, like in terms of smell or attracting spiders or flies or anything like that?
No. We start learning composting is 2018, and we start doing it at the outside the house. At first, yes, we have a problem like the smells, and then like the cockroach and others. But after that, we attended the course, the short course, and then we're going to the compost workshop. And when we know how to do it properly, and now there is no problem like smell and cockroach and others. And last year we decided to put 1 compost bin in our house.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's a great insight. Thank you so much, Andhini, and for coming back into
Thank
the conversation.
you.
I'm going to jump back to Enzo for a moment, because someone in the comments sent this question, and don't forget, you can continue to send in your questions in the comments. They said, thank you very much for the informative presentation. This comes from NT Intan, and they said, if I may ask Enzo, how long did it take to implement such thorough waste management hub composting? Which portion of it caused the most concern, and which component took the most time to implement? Enzo.
Yes, I already provided a few very quick information as a feedback in the chat box. Anyway, as I already told you, Milan totals 1.4 million people, 800,000 daily commuters, and some 21 million visitors a year. I don't know, Milan is not so beautiful as Rome is, where Colin is currently based, but probably they all come to visit separate collection. We have got 2 masterpieces. One is The Last Supper, the famous painting by Leonardo da Vinci, and the second one is separate collection of the organics. So indeed, not joking, there's plenty of delegations coming from New York, Berlin, Sofia, whatever. However, it took 1.5 years, actually, starting in November 2012 and covering 100% of the population by June 2014. The city was basically divided in 4 quarters, but just because there was no possibility to purchase all the needed buckets, bins, bags, and so on, all at the same time in order to distribute them as a starter kit to all the population. Each quarter was totaling 350,000 people, and each quarter was getting into the very city center until the Cathedral Square, because we wanted to show it may be done both in the outskirts and in the densely populated city center. And it was working. I would not say there was a particularly difficult aspect, but as every modern city, Milan is hosting many different ethnic groups. We have got 48,000 Filipinos, 25,000 Chinese, Egyptians, Peruvians, Ukrainians, whatever. And of course, we had to engage with the local communities. So we had the booklet giving instructions on separate collection translated into 10 different languages. And that was important, because they felt well cared after by the city's waste management service. They said, well, they considered us as a part of the community and an important bit in the program. And so we want to behave. And that was effective as well.
Liz in the comments said, you can also use worm composting boxes for your home. They don't smell. It's not for all the kitchen waste, but it's a good beginning. And some other people are saying in here, they compost in a different way. They give the leftover food to the home animals, which is another way of doing it. So Enzo, thank you so much. We'll go back for the final word to Ikbal Alexander, and we'll ask him his final 5 tips for people who want to start composting and reducing more at home. Your final 5 quick tips, Ikbal.
Yes, thank you. So first, start from yourself. 2, start small. 3, get involved in your local communities. 4, get your family involved. And the last one is act now.
Good stuff. Thank you so much to our 3 speakers, to Ikbal Alexander, who is the head of a recycling center there and gave a very passionate and great talk a while ago, to Enzo, who we just heard from, who's above me. I'm in Rome, he's up in Milan, here in Italy. And as well to Andhini Miranda, who was talking about her husband and her 9-year-old son and how they reduce, reuse and recycle and compost at home. And that brings to an end the first keynote session, which was called How Much Waste Are You For? 10, 5 or 0? In just a moment, we're going to start our speed networking. It's a bit like speed dating, but it's speed networking, where we're going to break into different rooms and get to know each other a bit more. But first of all, just 1 or 2 quick comments. Ekaterina says, here in Russia, we, our family, are lucky to have a dacha. That's a summer house in the countryside. So we compost there in the warm seasons of the year. And in winter, we sometimes drive there. So we collect for some time in buckets at the balcony, the apartment that we live in. There is no government program or something, so no other opportunity to collect the kitchen waste. So there's another option. They collect it all year round, and then in the warm summer seasons, when they go to their summer house, they compost it then. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Enzo. Here in Dashang, we make vegetable compost and liquid organic fertilizers in order to alleviate the difficulties of rural populations in the agricultural sector and to limit the use of chemical fertilizers which are harmful to health. That's another great idea, that you can take something that is waste to other people and you can turn it into something that can be used as a healthy alternative to a chemical component that we are using today, which is ultimately harmful to our health. So thank you all for that great global insight. Isn't it fascinating? Like, that's the amazing thing about the Let's Do It World Conference. Where else would you be hearing these different perspectives from Indonesia, from the States, from Italy, from Germany, all coming together? And that's what we're going to have for the next couple of days. So it's great to have you here, and thank you so much for being involved. So now we're going to start our speed dating, or not speed dating, or speed networking. And I've become too much of an Italian now, living in Rome. And we're going to hand you over now to 2 hosts